Okay, ready to go? Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. At this time, I'd like to ask all in the council chambers, turn off your cell phones or set them to vibrate and any other electronic equipment. Today is September 5th, and the public hearing of the Stratford Zoning Board of Appeals will come to order to hear those petitions advertised in this session. For those of you not familiar with this process, each petitioner or their designated representative will present their case, to the board. When they have concluded, board members will then have an opportunity to ask any questions they may have. I would then ask if anyone here wishes to speak in favor or in opposition to the petition. We ask all petitioners to speak clearly and directly into the mic. After all petitions have been heard, we will then recess to our administrative session. Interested parties are welcome to stay. However, only board meetings and staff will be allowed to speak at this time. Please be advised that clapping, shouting, or any other way of expressing opinions on the application will not be tolerated. Okay? Mr. Greger, would you like to take petition number 1 off the table?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Petition number 1, 22 to 26 Allen Street. Excuse me. Petition of East Coast Renovations, LLC, seeking a waiver of 5.1.2 requiring minimum lot area of 5,000 feet per dwelling unit for an existing two-family dwelling in an RM1 zone. The hardship, it's a 2012, the regulations changed from 7,500 square feet to 10,000 square feet.
Okay, please state your name and give that handsome young man the mailers.
My name is Larry Wells. I gave the mailings in July, and I was told that I didn't need to send them out again.
Okay, do we have those on record?
Yes, I believe they were received.
Okay.
Yes, we have.
Okay. Please proceed.
Good evening. My name is Larry Wells. I'm a local builder. I live here in Stratford. I reside on 330 Harvest Ridge Road. All my children lived in Stratford, went to the public school systems. I'm here for two petitions. The first one is I'm asking for a variance from 10,000 square feet to 7,500 square feet. The hardship is in 2012, the zoning regulations changed from 7,500 square feet to 10,000 square feet. So that makes the two families in the area non-conforming. What I'll show you here is I went out about 4 or 5 streets around the area. This is the subject property here, and all the blues that I colored in here are all the two families or duplexes that are 7,500 square feet or smaller. The orange are 3 families which are 7,500 square feet or smaller. So what that kind of shows you is that there are multifamily houses in the area that are non-conforming. Since my last meeting, I did a little research, and I did find a petition that was in Waterford, Connecticut, and I'll just read you a couple of paragraphs with it. It says, the subject lot, which was created as a district parcel in 1929, had an area of 7,500 square feet at the time of purchase. In 1954, the town of Waterford passed zoning regulations that established the location as an R20 residential zone. The regulations require that each lot have a minimum square feet of 20,000. The court found that the plaintiff's hardship was not self-created. Rather, the start of the plaintiff's hardship was the burden of the 1954 zoning regulations. The hardship which is justified a Board of Zoning Appeals as granting a variance must be one that originates in the zoning ordinance and arises directly out of the application of the ordinance to stipulate or conditions beyond the control of the parties involved. That's all I have on this petition.
Okay, any questions? Ms. Young?
Good evening, Mr. Wells.
Good evening.
Are you willing to put into the record what you just read from, and is there a source from what you were reading?
Yes.
Perhaps you could share that with the member closest to me?
What I did was I researched it and I found like 4 pages, but I condensed it down to this.
If you're willing, since that document in your left hand has the citation, if we could have both, that might be helpful. And for the record, Mr. Wells, I don't believe our chair was here in July. And you'll recall I had asked you about your familiarity with the 2012 regulation that you cited for your hardship, and I think gave you a copy of what Jay Hibansky had given me as the rationale used by the Zoning Commission for enacting the regulation. In summary, the regulation was enacted because the Zoning Commission, quote, believes that this change is needed to prevent overcrowding of land, would help in lessening congestion in the streets, and would promote the health and general welfare of the community. I'm just referencing that since not all of the members were here at the last meeting. And 2012, one would think, is in more recent history than the reference you made to Commission looking back some 50 or 60 years as to what people did and why they did it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jay, will you stamp this in? We can pass it down. Yeah.
Any other questions? Mr. DeCilio?
No, I was reading.
Oh, okay. Hearing none. Thank you very much. And was there anybody would like to speak in favor of this petition? Would anybody like to speak against this petition? Hearing none, do I have a motion to close?
Motion to close?
Motion by Mr. DeCilio, second by Ms. Young. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Now, we took 1 and 2 together, basically, right? Okay. Okay. Would you like to read petition number 2, Ms. Young?
Petition number 2, 26 Allen Street, petition of East Coast Renovations LLC, seeking a waiver of section 4.2, requiring minimum lot area, minimum lot width to construct a single-family dwelling in an RM-1 zone. Hardship, the existing house location prohibits the potential use of an additional legal building lot.
Okay.
My name is Larry Wells. I reside at 330 Harvest Ridge Road, Stratford, Connecticut. I'm seeking a variance for the lot, which is right next door to the 2-family that I just spoke about, from 7,500 square feet to 5,314 square feet with a frontage of 53 feet. So what I did was I put another chart together. Again, the orange here, or the red, is the said property. The yellows are approximately 14 houses in the area that are the same size as the potential building lot or smaller. And again, I went 4 streets out. The blues are 8 houses that are 2 families or duplexes that have smaller lots or the same size. And the orange is just 1 3-family, which is a couple of blocks over. That is a smaller lot than my said property. So basically what this shows is that it is somewhat consistent with the area. That's it.
Any questions? Ms. Young?
Procedural question for Mr. Hibansky. Mr. Hibansky, if the board says no to the first application, is there any need to act on the second application? Do we need to take a vote on both?
I think we should vote on both.
Thank you.
Okay, any more questions? Hearing none? Thank you very much. Would anybody like to speak in favor of this petition? Would anybody like to speak against it? Hearing none? Motion to close?
Motion to close.
Ms. Young? Mr. Greger? Okay.
Ms. Sanders?
Janice, yes. Okay. Would you like to take petition 3 off the table?
Yes.
Thank you.
21 Barrow Street, petition of Lisa Rodriguez seeking waivers of the front setback and maximum building coverage to construct front and rear porches in a RS4 zone. Hardship is corner lot.
Go ahead.
Hello, I'm Lisa Rodriguez. I'm very nervous. I'm requesting a variance because I would like to,
Do you have your mailers?
I do?
Can you give them to
Yes.
Mr. Greger?
I sent them out on, I think, August 9th and August 10th.
Okay, go ahead.
Do you want me to take them over? Oh. Okay, so I'm requesting a variance because I would like to put a front porch on my house.
Can you repeat what you just said? I didn't-
I'm seeking the variance because I would like to put a front porch, and because of the setback and the percentage of the amount of property you're allowed to have, I need the variance. You're allowed the 25%, and I need 26.1 for a front porch. And I'm also putting, it says a back deck on there. It's like a walkout, so I could just walk out and have another access to my backyard. It's not a huge deck, but I have to
Okay.
call it a deck.
Any questions, guys? Ms. Young?
Can you articulate the hardship, the reason why the variance should be granted, in your opinion?
Because I think aesthetically it would make my house look nicer having the front porch, and I don't actually have the sidewalk, but because of the setback, I have front steps, so I need a little over 3 feet wider than my front porch steps to have the front porch on my house.
Thank you.
Yes.
Procedural question for Mr. Hibansky. On her application form, or on our agenda, it references corner lot as the hardship. Is it accurate to say that because she has frontage on 2 streets, she has 2 front setbacks and the others are side setbacks?
Correct.
And so, just to remind you, I think on your application form, you were talking about how that was a unique feature to your property, that you had more challenges from a setback perspective than perhaps another property owner who was not on a corner lot.
Okay, and I sent also the letters to the people across from Main Street, also reference, doing this, having the meeting and stuff tonight.
Can I ask you about your coverage request?
Yes,
If I understand correctly, you're like within 1% of being in zoning compliance and not needing a coverage relief.
yes.
Is that correct, Jay? She's very close to
That's correct.
compliance.
Yeah, about 1%.
So close, I want to ask you if you have exhausted all means to get yourself into compliance from a coverage perspective. I'm personally, I'm just one member, persuaded that your corner lot configuration makes it unique and worthy of consideration for setback relief. I'm not feeling as generous as it comes to coverage relief because I see you're so close, making me think, isn't there some shed that could be reduced in size, or some deck that could be reduced in size, something to
I don't
make
have
that...
I have no other deck. I have nothing else. I do have a shed that was there when I purchased the property, and it would constitute taking it down. It's in my driveway on the side of my house, but I have nothing else, no other deck, walkout, front porch, or anything else that is protruding. It's just my house and the shed that are on my property.
Jay, do you know how much square footage it would take to get the coverage into compliance? Are we talking about
To be exact, I don't know. Let me see here.
plus or minus?
It's 1.1%, it's about 75, right? About 80 feet.
Let's see.
I don't have my phone. It'd be about 82 feet.
About 80 feet. Square feet, probably. So, I don't have a scale here with me, so, but looking at it, we have, I think it's a 10 by 10 or 8 by 8 shed.
That might do it.
It might. 8 by 8, it won't. 10 by 10, it will.
So just so you understand my question, I was trying to see if you had explored alternatives to bring your site into compliance from a coverage perspective, and Jay was trying to, Mr. Urbanski was trying to help us figure out, would the shed make a difference if there's like a safety issue that generates the need for your access through the front and back of your house? Perhaps the shed could be yielded so you could have that more important safety mechanism and still be in compliance for coverage. So it's just a question from one member about whether or not you'd be willing to consider deleting the shed so that you can have the coverage comply with your proposed additions to your home.
The shed is currently stocked full of, I utilize it as a snow blower because otherwise I would have no place else to put the snow blower. It can't go in the basement. I only have a one-car garage. So it has, the shed is, it's not an empty shed. It is a very full shed. I don't understand what you mean about safety.
I'm presuming from the answers you gave to why you need the additions that you were in need of additional access to your home, which I was using as a safety hardship why you needed this. You have a corner lot that makes the site unique, and perhaps from a public safety perspective, you need more egress to your house than you currently have. So I was thinking, from one person's opinion, that safety need might trump the storage need of the shed. But I think you've answered my question, which is you really want to keep your shed.
I would like to, and it's the additional access. It's just additional access to my backyard instead of having to go through the garage. That's what that would be. But I would like to keep my shed. It's very full.
Thank you for
Yes.
answering the questions.
Yes.
Any other questions? No? Hearing none. Would anybody like, thank you very much, ma'am. Would anybody like to speak in favor of this petition? Would anybody like to speak against the petition? Hearing none, motion to close. Mr. Cilio, Mr. Grega, I forgot your name. I'm bad tonight. Okay, Mr. DeCilio.
Okay, item number 4, 21 Evergreen Drive, petition of Peter and Danielle Marin, seeking waivers of front setback and minimum allowable distance to wetlands to construct front and rear porches in an RS4 zone. Hardship, presence of pond restricts development in accordance with zoning regulations.
State
Good
your
evening,
name, please.
Marcel Breton, 525 Peters Lane. My daughter and her husband are looking to put a front porch on the house, and we're not asking
I'm
to go
sorry, I
any
didn't
closer.
get
We
your
don't
name.
have
What is your
property.
name? What is your name?
State your
Marcel
name.
Breton.
How do you spell that?
Marcel Breton, M-A-R-C-E-L. Breton, B-R-E-T-O-N.
Please proceed.
So we were looking to put a front porch to our house. And the present house doesn't have the proper setback from the street. We are not asking to come any closer to the street than what the present house is. Other than that, we're looking to put a deck in the rear of the house. We don't have the proper setback from the brook, from the water course. The present house doesn't meet proper setback anyways. It did it today, but we're seeking to put a deck behind her house. The house presently is a walkout basement, so it'd be much convenient to have a deck at the upper level. And that was pretty much where we're asking the board.
Okay, anything else? Any questions?
Presently, the Conservation Department, I believe that's sent,
I have a letter here, I think that Mr. Brenton was going to reference. I received an email from the Conservation Administrator today that addresses some of my staff comments, and I'll just read it into the record here. Marcel Brenton was in this morning regarding his application for zoning variances to build a deck at 21 Evergreen Drive. I have previously met with Mr. Brenton on site, and I am not requiring any inland wetlands permits. Could you please accept this email as approval from my department? Which we will.
Okay. Mr. DeLeo.
Yes, I have a question. So I see on your plan the proposed deck, and I understand that part of the application. But it also says on the front, proposed 16 feet so this is the proposed covered front porch also?
yes.
Okay. Here's the deck here. And this is a gable. Okay, got it. Oh. So the porch exists. Excuse me, does the front porch currently exist and you're just putting a gable over it?
The front porch is going to be, we're asking to extend it out, that's 7 feet that's on that plan.
Oh, they want to extend it.
But we're still looking to maintain the setback that the present house has from the street.
Okay.
Because the way the house was cocked on the lot.
Yeah, I see it was turned to try to maintain a setback from the pond, and I understand how it was constructed,
Yep.
kind of turning it. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Ms. Young?
Concerning the deck closer to the wetland area,
Yep.
is there going to be grass or gravel underneath the deck to capture stormwater runoff, or is it going to be paved underneath?
Actually,
Or
the present patio that exists, it's about halfway underneath the deck, and that was going to remain. It's a slate patio that's existing already, that's present there now, and we're looking to keep that there.
Mr. Hibansky, if I could ask a procedural question, is it standard for the zoning office or conservation, if they were regulating this, to require some kind of drainage to capture stormwater runoff underneath the deck in the form of gravel to protect the wetlands and filter the nutrients?
I think if they felt that there was a concern for it, that's something that typically would be either stipulated in an over-the-counter permit from it would be stipulated in an over-the-counter permit from the Conservation Administrator.
But not in this case because they're not going to regulate it?
No. Based on the feedback that I received from the Conservation Administrator this morning, my take was that she had no concerns regarding the work and that she didn't feel that there were going to be any environmental concerns regarding the runoff.
Thank you.
And I would leave that to her discretion.
Thank you.
If we left the patio the way it is now, there would be less impact on conservation also, so that's why we're looking to keep it the way it was.
Thank you. No other questions?
Anybody else? Nope. Hearing none, thank you very much. Would anybody like to speak in favor of this petition? Would anybody like to speak against it? Hearing none, motion to close. Ms. McGinnis and Mary Young. Okay. Mr. Greger, we're back to you again. Petition number 5.
Petition number 5, 225 Lordship Boulevard, petition of 225 Lordship Boulevard LLC, seeking waivers of minimum lot area for a self-storage facility, maximum allowable height, and the allowance of only one principal structure per lot to construct a self-storage facility in a CA zone. The hardship, see attached letter in file.
Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Raymond Rizzio, R-I-Z-I-O, an office at 1 Post Road, Fairfield, Connecticut. I'm happy to be before you tonight representing 225 Lordship Boulevard, LLC. Our mailing certificate had been forwarded to the zoning office already. Just want to make sure that's clear for the record.
It is.
This is probably one of the more exciting projects I've been involved with, and certainly one of the more interesting projects. And when we get around what it's surrounded by, you'll understand what this is one of those few projects that I believe actually has a classic hardship when you think about developing the site. So the property, you know, used to be the old Lordship Hotel. Our client stepped up big. I know the town was very supportive of this and has, in the process of investing millions of dollars in turning the Lordship Hotel into apartments. It's a quality project. Developer's a very significant apartment developer out of Stratford. Very excited about the Stratford market and is really trying to recreate the entire parcel to take it from the eyesore that it currently is into really an attractive development, multi-use development, which is really at the entrance to Stratford coming up Lordship Boulevard. So I have a bunch of pictures which I'll hand out to you, and when in doing that, I'll help explain why our variances, what we need them for. The first variance that you talk about, and it's funny, and looking at Jay's projects, is in talking to Jay and the staff, and then looking at the staff comments, was our first is to reduce the amount of acreage required for a self-storage facility from 10 acres to what we have is 4.73 acres. I'd like to these are a couple of self-storage facilities that we've got approved, if we can just pass those down. What's happened in the self-storage field is that my gut instinct is when the town enacted this 10-acre restriction, that this is when these self-storage facilities were built in large industrial complexes. They were offshoots of moving companies. In fact, most self-storage facilities are actually the ones in Stratford that you can find are typically associated with moving companies. A number of years ago, the self-storage industry.
Excuse me for interrupting. Do we all have the same thing?
I hope so.
Okay, so I'm sure.
Yeah, no, I passed. I have multiple
Thank you.
things. And these are examples of some of the self-storage facilities that our offices hadn't gotten approved and worked on. So what's happened is the self-storage industry took a big change over the last 10, 15 years and became more of actually a retail approach. It's no longer just to satisfy people, when they need to move their stuff overnight, business. There's the reach out to the retail people, and almost like a retail look. For example, if you look at all the new self-storage facilities, I'll show you two of them that are built, and you probably drive by a lot of them. The first one is, you'll see right along, it's brand new, was just built right off exit 25 in Fairfield. So if you travel up and down, it's right, and what's nice about it, and shows you that this really doesn't have any detraction on value, it's right next door to the new Range Rover dealership in Fairfield. This project, as you can see, the buildings are no longer built like these old industrial buildings. They have windows. They're attractive to look at. Let me just give you a quick rendering of what our building will look like. It's much more of a retail look, an attractive look, and gives a feeling of it's welcoming because and you probably experienced this in Stratford alone, which has really no self-storage facilities. Or quality self-storage, and climate controlled, is with the explosion of apartments, people downsizing. They need places for their stuff. So storage units can go anywhere from 10 by 10 to 100 square feet, all the way up to 2,500 square feet. Therefore, the need to be near where the people are. And the industry addressed that by changing the whole look of the buildings, making it more of a retail component. I mean, it's not really much different than you would see on what would you call a pharmacy? It almost looks like a large Walgreens or a CVS, or looks like something you would see at a mall. But it's to attract homeowners. This is not just driven by business people anymore, storing their equipment and storing their wares. There is a tremendous need for what we'll call to service the residential component, and we don't have that in Stratford. So people want to feel comfortable. It's almost like they're shopping, even though the typical visit is typical stay, believe it or not, in these type of facilities are about between 1 and 2 years. This is not something where they create a lot of traffic. The other thing that's important, if you ever drive by a self-storage facility, so the other one is a Westies in Fairfield. One thing you'll always see is you'll never see any cars. I mean, as I said, the turnover happens so infrequently. People literally come in, they put their stuff in, they'll check in with the manager. There's very few employees. You have 1 or 2 employees typically on site, and their job really is to keep it clean, keep it efficient, keep it secure. The security systems are always very well mounted. So this change in the industry to make it more user-friendly has driven down the requirement of the amount of acreage that you need. Our project is really also driven in 2 components. One, we think it's the appropriate place for it. It's right off the highway, doesn't impact any residential communities. It is an area on Lordship Boulevard where there's a lot of traffic, there's businesses, there's the ability and the ability for people in vehicles to have very safe access to the property. So that, we believe, is clearly that the requirement of a 10-acre parcel, we think, would be is unnecessary. As I said, this facility will only require, by the regulations, 21 parking spaces. My gut instinct is if more than 5 parking spaces are used on a daily, I've been doing this for about 20 years, and have probably done over a dozen self-storage facilities. If there's more than 5 or 6 cars in a parking lot of a self-storage facility, it's pretty surprising. The beauty of this is we're trying to do this as a mixed-use project in connection with the revitalization of the hotel into apartments. Now, you might ask, what's unique about this? Where really does our hardship exist? And our hardship exists in we're going through this multi-million-dollar renovation of an apartment building. We stand behind the transfer station, an oil tank farm to the west, a transfer station to the south, a contractor storage yard to the south of that, and an asphalt roof asphalt recycling facility to the west. I don't know that I can find, to talk about a hardship being unique and a property being unique, it's probably one of the more unique circumstances you will ever see coming before this commission. So we have this beautiful plans, we're redoing this facility, and we're trying to also make the project work where we get a good source of income, something that's useful for the community, something that's consistent with your regulations. Remember, not asking for a use variance, something that services the community and will interact with the residential use. Hence, a self-storage facility. Now, the self-storage facility actually here will do a multitude of things. One, we have a large part of rent. We have a large number of apartments. Number 2, it will not create any traffic or parking constraints on our property or on the surrounding roads. And 3, it will give our apartments a fantastic buffer from surroundings that this building is encountered. If you've been there, especially in the last few days, you get a southern wind. The smell coming off the transfer station is horrible. This building will help block that. The beauty of the back of our building is, one, we don't face anything but the transfer station and Dowling's construction yard. We have tried to plant, we've got trees there that are probably like 30 feet tall now and barely do a dent on anything. This building will visually be attractive and help promote the entry, because you can even see the transfer station as you come down Lordship Boulevard. So if you come down Lordship Boulevard, you'll no longer see the transfer station. It will allow our tenants to be able to have a protection from that transfer station. It will improve their view. One of the things that was suggested, which I'll show later, is we also did a shadow study. There'll be no impact of any shadows. And that dovetails into our request for height. First of all, we're looking for a height variance to go from 50 to 55 feet. The current building is 60 feet. We would like to keep it just short of that, but large enough to be a buffer, yet work in a very economical and efficient manner. There's also issues with regard to flooding, which requires our building to be a little higher, so our first floors are built higher. So we believe that this is an excellent use for the site. It provides a compatible use for the existing building on site. So the other thing we were required to do, the three waivers are height, acreage, and to have more than one principal building on the site. This would be an additional principal building. So you have a building that provides a significant amount of taxes, provides a buffer from existing uses, which are really kind of not the friendliest uses to a residential component, whether it was a hotel or the apartments, and something that we can't change. We're not going to move the tank farm. No one's moving the tank farm. I doubt very much that Stratford find anywhere to move the transfer station and the recycling facility across the street. So you have a property that has no traffic, no services, brings significant tax dollars, and acts as a buffer to a revitalized area of the property that's very much in need in this town. You know, it's funny. I'm going to give you these pictures because we were there taking pictures from the top of the building. You can pass these around. So normally, like this, it's one of the nice things that's attractive when you have a residential facility, if you're near a property that has birds and an Audubon type view. Well, the first project, you cannot imagine the amount of seagulls. But the problem is what the seagulls are doing is they're going in and they're just grabbing all the garbage out of the transfer station, and they end up all over our property. Those trees are about 25 feet high. There is no way, maybe sometime in our lifetime, it'll be to the roof, but from the 5th or 6th story of the apartment building, you'll always be able to see this transfer station. And these trees we clean all the time from whenever there's a southern wind, the stuff that blows out of the transfer station. We're constantly picking up papers and debris and mess. So that's the view from the property from the parking lot. As you can see, these trees don't even come close to covering the transfer station, and they're immense. These trees were just put in, and our clients spent a significant money, and it really doesn't do much at all. Now, if you look from above, so if you get to the 6th floor, which is where the apartments are, I don't know that you're going to get any trees to buttress that view, to take away to take away the impacts of the surrounding properties on this, very important property we believe in the town of Stratford. And then you look to the side, you'll see the tank farm. You can also see across the way the Dowling construction site with large dirt piles. And then if you look across the street, which our project will also shield, is the asphalt roofing recycling facility. And we believe that is very unique and a very significant impact on this property. What I'd like to do is just show you, I believe the pictures help, although you've all probably been there, some of these surrounding properties from the ground site, our building. This is from the rear of the property, looking into from the parking lot. This property is in a complete renovation. Everything's been gutted. They're redoing the outside. Have a rendering of what the apartment building will look like, being complete. Total revitalization of this site. If you look to the side, the reason I tried to show this picture is, if you see there's a middle tree. The middle tree is where the new entrance will be. The existing, the proposed self-storage facility will be from this tree furthest to the right and go back. So it will completely shield the property and people driving by from the asphalt recycling facility to the west of the property. This area is what's currently in the front of the building, which we are going to tear down and hope to replace it with a bank and a restaurant in the front, so that this will be a really tremendous mixed-use property, which your regulations are designed for, but are currently being withheld because of the surroundings in the neighborhood and the physical makeup of the property. So that will all come down, including the front. So what you have is something that will take you from one of the eyesores as you get off Lordship Boulevard. We believe a rejuvenized project that is thriving, retail in the front, apartments in the back, and then self-storage facility supporting it in the rear. All of it with no impact on one individual resident in the town of Stratford, no impact on your traffic and the movements, and bring everything up to code with regard to landscaping. I don't, unless weeds between the asphalt contact serve as under your landscaping requirements, this will be completely compliant with regard to the landscape. There are no waivers requested with regard to parking, and we believe that all of these uses is what a typical mixed-use zone are entitled to. However, given the physical restrictions of the site, the unusual characteristics of the surrounding properties for what was considered a retail zone, that clearly it warrants the hardship that we're asking for tonight. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I think this is a unique opportunity for the town to take advantage of a situation that's really pretty difficult now. And I don't think our client really underestimated when they overtook the hotel and did the apartments, the impact that the transfer facility would have on this property. From one, if you close in November or in December, and now you go out there in August, the smell is just horrible in a southern wind. The amount of the debris that ends up on our property is ridiculous. But all of this with and the best part is we're not just building a wall. We're building something that's a use that's consistent with your regulations, a use that fits the property, a use that acts as a buffer in one instance, but is a tax-producing, revenue-producing property that fits in perfectly without having any negative impact on any adjoining properties. I hope I sometimes tend to talk too long, but I hope tried to make this a complete application, hopefully anticipating some of your questions and answering some of your questions, but I'm happy to answer any questions the commission may propose.
Great, thank you.
I just want the commissioners to know that I received a letter today, this afternoon, from one of the abutting neighbors, Stratford Industrial Corporation. I just want to read it into the record. Dear Jay, we have received the plans for the proposed development at 220 Boulevard. Their petition seeking waivers of the minimum lot area for a self-storage facility, maximum allowable height, and the allowance for only one principal structure per lot to construct a self-storage facility in a CA zone. We have no concern or objective to these requests. Best regards, Michael Courtney.
The other thing that I can show you is Jay did make a request, and I have copies for you.
I'm sorry, Jay, where are those people located whose letter you just read into the record in relationship to where we're speaking of?
Located to the...
I think they're directly across the street to the west.
They're correct. Directly across the street to the west.
Thank you.
This is and I have copies, which I believe, but I don't know if each one passes through. These are copies of we did a shadow survey of what will happen if this building's built. And the question, Jay, that you said, what would the impact of the shadow of this building be on the existing on the future? It was always been residential, but it'll certainly go from an hourly residential facility to a much longer residential facility. And this is basically the shadow study done by our architect. The reason you would think that the shadow, remember the sunrise goes from east to west, and it'd be different if the buildings were situated differently. But the shadow casts are minimal, and I would tell you even a little bit of a shadow versus what the people in the apartments would have to look at now would certainly help in warranting this waiver. So you want me to give you all
You can pass them around. That'd be great. I won't get one.
They're all the same, right? Yeah, all the same.
I'm going to ask does anybody have any questions? Mr. DeSoya.
Yes, Mr. Rizzio, thank you for your fine presentation. I had two questions. I noticed on A2, map A2, which is the site plan, there's no elevations, and I was wondering if, I'm not sure who's with you, if the engineer's here, you can explain to the commission the current elevation of the grade and any change in proposed elevation. You mentioned flooding in your presentation. I didn't know what the elevation was relative to BFE, base flood elevation, on the current grade.
My understanding for commit with flood standards, we have to raise the property 4 feet, raise the floor 4 feet.
So you're going to raise the building 4 feet or the grade 4 feet?
The building, because the first
Okay.
floor will be mostly garages. So it would happen along the rear of the property, so people will be able to, there'll be a number of garages in the rear of the property will allow people to store a boat,
Right.
store vehicles,
That would be
classic
appropriate.
vehicles, things like that. We'd also agree to, because I know when you say storage, that there be a condition that there be no outside storage of anything, so that the commission doesn't have to worry that this thing somehow, somebody leaves their boat, decides they're going to leave their boat behind a fence. Everything, all storage in connection with this approval would have to be, would agree to a condition that it be inside.
Okay, thank you. And if I were so inclined to support this application, Mr. Rizzio, based on the site plan that was presented to us, would it be unreasonable for us to put a condition on this approval that the front 25,000 square feet be demolished before a building permit is issued? Because you're showing a retail space of 2,000 feet, and you're showing a drive-in restaurant of 3,000 feet, but when I drove by it, there's a 25,000 square foot for lease sign on the front, and that's really a...
I don't, not an issue at all.
Okay, thank
We
you.
just have, it's kind of been piecemeal, and until we figured out a general development plan for the property, which we are ready to go, we'll go right to P&Z and then right to building permits. CubeSmart is signed up and ready to go. With that, we have to get rid of the 25,000 square feet to make our parking work, and frankly, it's
Okay,
it's
fine.
ugly.
Thank you.
In fact, it's a welcome condition. Thank you.
Any questions? Any more questions? Ms. Young?
Good evening. In review, in reviewing Jay Hibansky's August 11th memo, on page 1, paragraph 5, Jay talks about it, the challenge in finding traditional hardship associated with your application. So I am curious if you explored a text amendment. As you mentioned in your opinion, perhaps this 10-acre minimum lot size requirement may be outdated and not in keeping with today's needs for storage facilities. Did you explore a text amendment to fix that rather than seeking a variance without a hardship?
Here's my issue with the text amendment, I think. First of all, I think this is a classic case of hardship. I've been doing this 30 years, and thank God my clients don't have to encounter these type of situations, but this is probably classic hardship. It's unusual, it's unique. It's not a situation that's general throughout the community. I think this is well supported as a classic hardship case. From a text amendment issue, the problem with the text amendment is that you're talking about a town-wide regulation, and you're talking about an education of a planning and zoning commission to take into account all properties within these districts. This property as specifically relates, I believe that generally, yes, they probably should be in smaller properties. And a 10 acres doesn't make any sense. Frankly, you wouldn't try to find a 10-acre piece that's left in Stratford to develop unless you were going to redevelop. I think the text amendment was going to be, we just didn't think that it was appropriate in this location. We thought that this site was so unique that this site warranted a variance versus going to the town for a text amendment.
Thank you. I guess if I were you, I could have thought of writing a text amendment that might have been targeted to this and maybe another site. If I was proposing a storage facility within 500 feet of an interchange, Interstate 95, maybe then I could have a reduced lot size requirement, and then I wouldn't be taking on the town as a universe, but maybe just a couple of sites.
Well, I think what's unique about this property also is it's the mixed-use component. So we just thought that this property is so unique that we felt your board was the best to address it. And we thought that it certainly didn't open up questions throughout the town or give us the ability to draft an amendment that ended up being an issue that could create spot zoning because of the concerns of how broad an amendment like this may go. And I have no idea why the 10 acres there, I don't think Jay has any idea, but my gut instinct is because when I started doing these 20 years ago, the self-storage facilities were an offshoot of moving companies that were traditionally on much larger sites. They have now become an independent business and development with a whole separate type of clientele than was there historically, and that's evolved over the last 10 years.
If I can bring to your attention paragraph 2 of Jay's memo of August 11th. Jay concludes that paragraph by suggesting the board may choose to inquire whether the 2 retail restaurant buildings are being considered for this variance and application. You continue to talk about this mixed-use project. You've made reference on your plans and in your presentation to the drive-through restaurant and bank. If we were to approve the self-storage facility, will we also be guaranteed those 2 other projects, the drive-through restaurant and bank?
We would like to be able to go directly to plan and zoning and have 4 buildings on the site. If this commission wished to, we would, first of all, and I think one of the things that's great about it, addressed by Commissioner DeCilio's possible condition that this commission may consider, which is to just tear down the 25,000 square feet. We would clearly be doing that with the intention of developing the retail in the front and would prefer not to come back for an additional variance. So we would like to consider the ability, as a condition of approval, that the 25,000 square feet come down. It would allow us to build 2 smaller retail components in the front.
So that's a yes, you would also accept a condition that requires those other 2 components to be built on site?
It's our request. This commission certainly has the authority to, I would think, grant an approval for 2 buildings or 4 buildings. We believe that the request to go from a self-storage facility, tear down to the apartment building with 2 retail, smaller buildings in the front, it would certainly be acceptable. I mean, I didn't think it sounded like it's on its way from Florida. I think we're not coming back to you piecemeal. We thought it was important to show you an overall site plan. So if questions like what Commissioner DeCilio brought up, I think it could be addressed here without coming back and revisiting and saying we showed you one thing and now we're bringing back another, and how many times you're going to come in piecemeal with this project. We thought an overall site plan we would like to get approved tonight and then move on with our approval so that we can lease the space and get going with our construction. It's very hard to do when you don't have the waivers in your hand.
So when you mentioned that the parking will work, that the storage facility use has a lower parking demand, does your site plan contemplate the proposed uses, and has it parked accordingly for it?
100%. If you look at the site plan,
You haven't spent as much time talking to us about the drive-through restaurant or the bank.
well, keep in mind, that'll all be subject to, since we're not requiring any parking, we're not looking for any parking variances, any driveway variances, anything of that nature. We're required to have, we would be required to, if we go on directly to P&Z with 172 spaces. We provide 183. We also like the way the parking works as we go into the site plan. What will happen, majority of the parking will be in the front. These are all basically mostly 1-bedroom apartments. You have only 21 spaces that are required with the self-storage facility. All of this parking will be from will be available for the residences. And the garages will be in the rear, so no garages will be visible from Lordship Boulevard or from garage will be from the rear, and that's where people wheel their parked cars and loads and things like that. And that will all be between, are now 20 to 30-foot trees in the berm in our building. So we've gone through spent a significant time putting together a plan that works. The retail component's going to be huge. I think it's going to be very attractive. I think this really changes the face as you come down Orange Boulevard off I-95. It's one of the projects I've been most happy to be associated with. I think we work with the town. As the town was happy to get rid of the previous owner, there were all sorts of sanctions. They were in court over the previous hotel, and our client has come in and basically stepped up and done what they were saying. They closed the hotel. They have completely began the renovations. They are going to be starting leasing within hopefully the next 6 months, and they are moving like gangbusters. This self-storage component is going to be very important to, we believe, to the success of the apartment building, and I think it is just a wonderful mixed-use site.
One more question on the drive-through restaurant, if that's correct. In your August 7th memorandum, you talk about your concerns of the rodents that are attracted by the transfer station. So I'm told that rodents can be attracted by dumpsters associated with restaurants. Where do you propose the dumpsters for this restaurant facility so that you don't attract the rodents that are in the neighborhood to a place you don't want them?
Since it wasn't part of this application, they'll be screened and done in accordance with your regulations, but close to the drive-through facility. So we have a number of this is a very desirable corner that, but for addressing of this property the way it is and its surrounding properties has unfortunately been let go to the condition that it is in now. We believe this, you put this behind it, you don't see a transfer station, but you see this. It blocks the southerly wind, it blocks all the debris. It has nobody's ever going to build an office back there. Certainly nobody in an apartment's going to want to look to the south when you saw what we saw from the 6th floor. But looking at this is no different than looking at a large retail facility. So all of this will work together, we believe, to make this 4 3/4 acre piece a jewel, but this self-storage facility is an important component. I've also spoken to the people who own Trico, which is the Trust family, which owns all the properties the next road south, and they're very supportive. They like the ability to be able to store things. The storage stuff is important, but cleaning up this Lordship Boulevard corridor, this goes a long way in doing that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any more questions? Hearing none, would anybody like to speak in favor of this petition? Would anybody like to speak against it? Hearing none, motion, oh. Oh. You have to come forward.
My name is Beatrice Mull. I'm at the transfer station every Saturday. I know what that's like down there. The storage facility would be a great addition. Not so sure about the restaurant. You're concerned about odors coming to the apartments from the transfer station. Gotta tell you, Popeyes stinks. It can really stink up a neighborhood, so that's not a real attractive thing. But the storage facility would be great. My concern is there are certain Saturdays where trucks lining up, cars lining up to get to the transfer station are 30 cars long. You can barely drive down Watson at all on a great day in the spring when everybody's doing their lawn and cleaning out their garages and stuff. So the impact of the traffic of this project to the neighborhood is negligible, but the impact of the current traffic on this project is a tough sell. It's going to be really tough to get down there. But the new storage facility, great screening. Lovely. Can't wait to have it built.
Just quickly in rebuttal, one of the things that are important self-storage facility, as far as the traffic generator, will be negative. If there's 4 to 5 cars a day, it'll be a lot. The only traffic generators that we do have would be up on Lordship Boulevard, which is more than able to handle any of the traffic, and that's what the entrance is. So we've shifted our current entryway is furthest to the south of the property. We've shifted that all the way past, because we're not crazy about driving past the asphalt shingle place, to further north on the property, so that basically the queue line, which will give the ability to increase the queue line into the town transfer station. So, and then when you talk about who will be using the retail in front, you're adding another couple hundred feet of queuing before anybody needs to even get out on Lordship Boulevard from the street or the street. Basically, for our project to be impacted by the transfer station, you have to have a line that almost runs from the transfer station out onto Lordship. All of these, the way this project works is least amount of traffic, a little more traffic, certainly different, a whole different component of traffic with the cars delivered, and certainly one that we use in here. And then our traffic generators basically sit out on Lordship Boulevard. So we think that this is a project that is very traffic sensitive. Remember, one of the things that's important when you develop a project, yeah, it meets the parking, yeah, I can say, but if it doesn't work, you're not going to get any tenants. With the promise, in what we propose to clean this up, we have a tremendous amount of interest in these two front pieces of property. And I don't think the traffic from the transfer station will impact our traffic generators. I don't see them conflicting at all. Like I said, the queuing line to affect our traffic generators is so far away that you basically would have to tell you really can't build anything else on anything that comes up and down Lordship Boulevard. So, and also those traffic, we will have a full traffic report, and that'll all be discussed because we still have to go to the second component, which is the special permit part of it. But as far as the ZBA waiver part of it, classic case of hardship. More importantly, I think a great way to plan a project that is so unique that the regs really couldn't contemplate all of these conditions coming to effect that unfortunately brings us in front of you to ask for these waivers. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. One more question, Ms. Young.
My interpretation of Beatrice's comment was she was more concerned for you about the traffic than she was about you impacting the traffic. And like Beatrice, I've spent many a weekend at the transfer station, and unfortunately, it can queue right up to the intersection, so it's a fair warning to you. I understood your last comment to mean that traffic studies are underway. We didn't get the benefit of seeing the zoning commission's approval for the apartment project, so I'm wondering, is this a major traffic generator?
No, not at all. You got to remember, it was a hotel.
I do know.
The traffic generated by the hotel was much more than generated by the apartment building. So there was actually a decrease in traffic in proposed use versus existing use when we went for the conversion.
Did that consider these additional uses that we're talking about tonight?
Well, that will be addressed, no. But I can tell you right now, I don't hold myself out as a traffic expert, but as being somebody who's done zoning for 30 years, I can tell you right now, the self-storage facility will have absolutely no impact. Generators that will have any sort of impact on a highly functioning major roadway. So I don't envision it. We've spoken preliminary to Michael Galante about it. He didn't see any issues at all.
I'm hopeful if Michael Galani is your traffic engineer, he will look seriously about the need for all those egress points onto Watson Boulevard. I can appreciate the fire marshal will want a second means of egress, but I would suggest the more you can use Lordship Boulevard as your access point, the better off you'll
We've been in discussions with the fire marshal, and those will all be addressed prior to going to zoning.
Thank you again.
Planning and zoning, I should say.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak for or against the petition? Hearing none, motion to close.
Thank you.
Have a motion by Mr. DeCilio, have a second by Janice. and that's it. Right now, I'd like to close the public hearing and go into the administrative session.
Motion to close? Motion to close.
Motion to close from Mr. DeCilio. Ms. Young is second. Okay. Mr. Greger, would you like to take petition number 1 off the table?
Petition number 1, 22 to 26 Allen Street. The petition
Any
of
discussion? No? Any opinions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is an interesting application because clearly the neighborhood has many pre-existing non-conforming lot sizes. However, it's a tall hardship agreement for me personally because there was a one-time cut, I understand previously, and whoever owns this property didn't act back in 2012 in opposition to any of the zoning amendments, and now 5 years forward, the hardship case is that the zoning regulations were changed 5 years ago. I yield to Commissioner Young because of your experience, and I'd like your opinion on this matter.
I happen to agree with you, and that's why you'll recall in July I had asked the question of the applicant, to what degree did they explore their hardship rationale, the 2012 regulation change, and they were not as familiar then as they seem to be today in understanding that it was very recently that the Stratford Zoning Commission changed these rules. There would have been public notice, so this or any other property owner could have gotten in under the wire, if you will, before the regulation was changed. So I'm not persuaded that the town is better served to go contrary to what the Zoning Commission desired as recently as 5 years ago and continue to act like it was 2011. So I'm not in favor of this application. I heard nothing new being offered tonight that was different than what was offered in July from the applicant.
Any other discussion? We have a motion to deny or excuse?
I'm going to make, we're on petition number 1, 2226 Allen Street. I'm going to make a motion to deny for insufficient hardship.
We have a motion.
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor to deny?
Aye.
Aye, and chair votes yes, so it goes 4-1. Okay. Ms. Young, will you take petition number 2?
Petition number 2, 26 Allen Street. As we heard Mr. Hibansky indicate earlier, even though we did not approve the first application, we still need to act on the second application. So I would make a motion to deny due to failure of approval for the first application and no demonstration of hardship.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Young, second by Janice. All those in favor to deny?
Aye.
Another 4-1. Chair votes yes. Janice, would you like to take number 3?
Number 3, 21 Barrow Street, is the hardship is a corner lot in building a front porch and a rear porch.
Okay, any discussion? Ms.
Hold
Young.
on.
Just to remind the board members, earlier this evening, we were talking about multiple variance requests, setback relief for front and rear of the house, and then coverage relief. And as you know, my day job is to try to bring people into zoning compliance, and that's what I was trying to probe with the applicant this evening. Had she exhausted all means to reduce the need for a coverage variance? And there obviously are ways you can reduce the proposal, you can remove existing conditions. The applicant was obviously not in favor of doing either. So I'm seeing that there is traditional hardship associated with the setback relief, the corner lot configuration. She has two fronts, those are the more conservative setbacks. So I would be in favor of approving in part and denying in part, approving the setback relief and denying the coverage relief.
Any other discussion?
Well, Ms. Young, I agree with you that in looking at the site plan, if the front door was facing Main Street, the porches would be conforming, because those would be side yards if Barrow Street didn't exist, and it would meet side yard setbacks. Being a corner lot, as you noted for the record, you're forced with front yard setback on Main Street and a front yard setback on Barrow Street. So now, which is the rear depth and which is the frontage depth? I guess I'm not quite even sure. Jay, is it where the front door is the front yard? I know you're, okay, so if you have a situation like this, where, I guess, well, I withdraw my question. I guess there's just two front yard setbacks. I don't know, I guess there's
This has
a
two
rear
fronts
yard.
and two
I don't know
sides.
what's the rear and what's the
There is a
side. Okay.
I think it's whatever is parallel to the street is the front. Doesn't matter where your front door is. And
Oh,
she has
okay.
two fronts because she's her property is parallel to the street.
Okay, got it.
Two portions of it.
I don't see, I did not drive by this property, so I'm speaking blind, but I don't see having a storage shed, even though it does increase the coverage, as a big problem. I mean, I do understand we're exceeding 25%, but we tend to approve those all the time. I don't know how the corner lot actually impacts the coverage. The hardship does impact the coverage, but I'm inclined to support the application in full.
So I've made a motion without a second, it sounds like. My motion was to approve in part and deny in part. Does anyone want to second my motion? Jay, procedurally, if my motion doesn't get a second, would Mr. DeCilio want to make his
May I
own?
make a motion to amend?
Sure, go ahead.
Well, it wouldn't be an amendment, because it wouldn't be a deny in part, so you can
I guess
withdraw your motion.
I will withdraw my motion, having no second.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to approve as presented the application of 21 Barrow Street for waivers of front yard setback and coverage.
Motion by Mr. DeCilio, second by Janice. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Negative vote. Negative vote for me.
So another 4-1.
4-1.
Okay. Where are we now? Mr. DeCilio, would you take number 4 off the table?
Item number 4, 21 Evergreen Drive. I'd like to take that off the table for deliberation.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Janice. Okay. Any discussion? No discussion? Ms. Young?
I'll make a motion to approve. I appreciate Jay receiving the comments from the Conservation Department, which were illuminating, to say the least. They have no concerns. The hardship being presence upon restricts development in accordance with the zoning regulations as articulated by the applicant.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a second by Janice. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, 5-0. Okay, Mr. Grega again.
225 Lordship Boulevard. Like to take it off the table?
I have a motion. I have a second. Ms. Janice, thank you. Okay, any discussion?
Yes, hold on. That went by me really quick. You made a motion.
To take it off the table.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I thought it was going right by me. No discussion.
Okay, any discussion on this?
I must speak publicly in favor of this. I think this is a great project. I think it's, I do go to the transfer station occasionally. I do see the seagulls and the wind blowing everything everywhere, and I think it's going to be a great addition to the corner. My concern always is, and I brought it up in questioning, we're the Zoning Board of Appeals, so we don't see the whole application. I will make a motion, actually, to approve, subject to the demolition of the 25,000 square foot front structure. Whether they come in with the site plan as presented of 2 different units, or they get some other tenant that wants a larger unit, that's up to them. I just want to get rid of the eyesore in the front as something in consideration for getting the large 120,000 square foot Cube Smart in the back.
Couldn't agree with you more. Okay, we have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I have a question of Mr. DeCilio. I agree with you. I think it's a terrific project. It'll be an enhancement to the gateway to Stratford, as we know it, coming off exit 95. You'll recall I questioned the applicant about Jay's observation that the hardship is maybe not as straightforward as the applicant suggested it was, in Jay's opinion. Does your motion to grant the variances requested come with your reference to what hardship you find? Or
I find the hardship as the property itself is situated in a very unique location. So many hardships we'll find, for setback hardships, a boulder or an outcropping of ledge or something unique to the property. What's unique to this property is the oil tank farm next door, the dump, and the asphalt recycling. There is a nice project, which wasn't mentioned, adjacent to it, but I think that is the hardship to this property. And I think, I don't know, that's the way I see it. That's the unique and identifying features of the property which cause a hardship.
Thank you.
Okay. Everybody ready to vote? You have a-
Need a second. So this is inclusive the waiver of the one principal structure per lot. That is inclusive of the 2 buildings in the front, I'm assuming, because I know that was a discussion. I just want to make sure I get that language correct.
Well, I think Mr. DeCilio's motion included a condition that he was looking for. And I guess a friendly amendment to Mr. DeCilio's motion would be, did he want to include the requirement that there be these 2 additional buildings in front, sort of supporting the need for the variance, which suggests more than one building?
Well, my intention was to not hand tie the applicant to the 2 buildings, but to have the applicant remove the existing structure. That gives the developer flexibility in, and let's say somebody came by and said, well, I want a retail facility that's 5,000 feet, that's 1 building, and then they want a bank for 1,000. In other words, the flexibility to develop the front as tenants in demand and the zoning commission, which is their purview, see appropriate. What I didn't want is to approve 120,000 square feet, and then all of a sudden they say, well, we want to repurpose this thing. Let's open up a catering facility in the front or something with that crazy roof line, and then it doesn't beautify the gateway to Stratford. So
I think that's a no, Jay.
removal of the existing structure was my concern, not as much. They're going to build something nice, I'm sure. Hopefully the 2 that are illustrated, but I didn't want that to be that restrictive. That was my intention.
So the applicant would not need to come back for waivers for the front two buildings, the waiver of more than 1 principal structure. I just want to make sure we have that. That was what my understanding of your statement was.
So let me see if I can try that again. Okay. You only get 1 building per lot.
1 principal building per lot.
The storage facility would be the 2nd building.
Correct.
They may or may not have a 3rd and 4th building, and perhaps we would all collectively like to be spared the 3rd and 4th iteration of what we're doing tonight.
That's correct.
So is there some way Mr. DeCilio can wrap that into his motion to spare himself a redo without binding the applicant for a 3rd or 4th building?
Commissioner Young, I'm all open for another friendly amendment.
I think Jay's nodding his head that he gets what you want and he's going to make it happen.
It's clear.
Okay.
Well done.
We would just include the proposed retail and the proposed dine-in restaurant as inclusive of the waiver of section 1.24.
Conceptual retail and conceptual drive-through. Okay.
It's fine by me.
Okay. So I have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second?
Second by Janice. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody against?
I'm still thinking. I really wanted a text amendment. I'm obviously not going to get it, so I'm going to vote to approve as well.
Okay, so it's 5-0. Thank you very much. Thank you. Right. Okay, you got any other business on the table here?
You have the minutes.
Yeah, we have to start with this, the items.
Right there. Okay. Can I have an approval of the minutes for July 5th?
Motion to
Who talked?
approve?
Ms. Young, second. Mr. Grega, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
5-0. Campsite plan review?
No.
No. Members' concerns?
Jay, thank you for collating. I know Mr. DeCilio asked for it, but I enjoyed the collating. Thank you.
Okay.
It was not an easy process, I will tell you that.
It was worth it for me.
I
Thank
mean,
you.
something that seems very easy, it took a few hours to get the idea across. But hopefully we got it, and we're fixed going forward.
Well, it's okay. Zoning is not getting an increased budget line item next year for collating, so don't go there.
We need more paper clips and rubber bands.
Okay, any other items?
Jay, have you amended the roster of members to acknowledge that I don't expire in 2019, as I thought before our July meeting?
I have not, but I will.
It was a bit of a rude awakening to learn that I'm going to be off this commission come November unless I'm reelected.
I'll have to get a letter from the town clerk. I'm not allowed to make any changes until the town clerk gives me that official letter.
They gave it to me when I said, "Oh no, believe what Jay gave me," and they're like, "No, we don't believe what Jay gave you."
Yeah.
They gave me it, so I'll forward it to you. But if you need to get it from them, I can appreciate that.
Yep, I
Okay.
will do that.
Motion
Thank
to
you.
adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, guys.
I know.
Thanks
That's
everyone
fine.
for filling in too, coming last second. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Not a problem.
Do okay or what?